Good evening and welcome to this auspicious program. It's an honor to be here with you. And my name is Acharya Sundari Jensen, and as mentioned, I'll moderate this program this evening with Swami Tyagananda ji and Dr. Jeffery Long about how we can apply ancient teachings of Vivekananda in this digital age. I have had the privilege to study and serve in the tradition of Kriya Yoga in the lineage of Paramahansa Yogananda for 30 years under the guidance of my guru, Yogacharya Ellen Grace O'Brien at the Center for Spiritual Enlightenment in San Jose. And as someone deeply involved in studying and teaching Vedanta, yoga philosophy, and interfaith dialogue, I'm delighted to be part of this conversation. And I look forward to exploring how Swami Vivekananda's timeless wisdom speaks to the challenges of this time, and how it continues to inspire and guide us individually and collectively in these very transformative times. And I'm sure this will be an enriching discussion that's relevant for our time between these two esteemed teachers. Well, first, let me introduce, I don't think I need to introduce Swamiji, Swami Tyagananda ji. Let me try again. I watched your video where you pronounced your name 3 times at the start of the video. Swami Tyagananda ji is a revered monk in the Ramakrishna order, and he serves as head of the Vedanta Society in Boston and as the Hindu chaplain at Harvard University and MIT. And after graduating from University of Mumbai, he joined the Ramakrishna order in 1976 and received initiation from Swami Vivekananda, a direct disciple of the Holy Mother, Sri Sarada Devi. And his monastic training included service in Mumbai, Balur Math, New Delhi, and Chennai, and he served over a decade as editor of Vedanta Kasari, the order's English journal. Swami Ji has authored and translated and edited 14 books, including Walking the Walk, a manual on Karma Yoga, and Knowing the Knower, a Jnana Yoga manual, and one of the books he co-authored is Interpreting Ramakrishna, Kali's Child Revisited. Among many other works, he regularly blogs and shares podcasts, lectures at leading universities, and is dedicated to supporting seekers and sharing the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, and Swami Vivekananda. His scholarly work, his writing, and his spiritual guidance reflect his deep commitment to making the ancient Vedantic teachings relevant in the world today. And also I'd like to introduce Dr. Jeffery Long. Dr. Long is a professor of religion and Asian studies at Elizabethtown College in Pennsylvania, and he's a leading scholar of Hindu and Jain traditions. He received his PhD from the University of Chicago Divinity School. And Dr. Long's work pays particular attention to themes such as nonviolence, religious pluralism, and the intersection of religion and popular culture. That's so interesting. I'm sure you're teaching a class about that. Dr. Long is the author of numerous books, including A Vision for Hinduism and Hinduism in America. And His two forthcoming titles are Indian Philosophy, The Essential Readings, and Arise, Awake. Swami Vivekananda speaks to the 21st century. He's delivered at several prestigious venues, including 3 times at the United Nations, and is widely recognized for his efforts to foster interfaith understanding. Among his many honors are the Hindu American Foundation's Dharma Seva Award and the International Ahimsa Foundation's Ahimsa Award. A devotee of Sri Ramakrishna, Dr. Long is active with the Vedanta Society and is dedicated to promoting peace and understanding through wisdom traditions of India. So please, I welcome you. And now, Swami Prasannatmananda will offer our opening mantras.
तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति 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 हरिः ओम्। Om. May the Lord protect us, both teacher and disciple. May He cause us to enjoy the Supreme. May we exert together. May our studies be true and faithful to become brilliant. May we never quarrel or hate each other. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto you all. Om Bhadram Karnebhi Shrunuyam Devaha Bhadram Pashyemakshabhirjajatraha Sthirairangaistuštuvahum svastanubhi Vyashema devahitam yadayuhu Swasti na Indro Vriddhasravaha Swasti na Pusha Vishwavedaha Swasti nastarksho arishtanemihi Swasti no brihaspatir dadhatu. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om. May we hear auspicious things with our ears. May we see auspicious things with our eyes. May we enjoy a healthy life that is beneficial to ourselves and to others. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto you all. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om. That's it. What is visible is the infinite. What is invisible is also the infinite. Out of the infinite being, the finite has come. Yet, being infinite, only infinite remains. Om, peace, peace. Peace be unto you. We are extremely happy today and grateful to revered Swami Tyagananda Ji Maharaj, Professor Jeffery and Acharya Sundari Jensen, because they have accepted our invitation and kindly agreed to participate in this program, which is part of our 125th anniversary of Swami Vivekananda's visit to the Bay Area. I offer my thanks to you all because you are also the part of this great event, which is commemorating Swami Vivekananda's visit, 125th anniversary in the Bay Area. Thank you.
Begin with Swami Tyagananda Ji and then Professor Yang offering individual talks, and then they'll have a dialogue between them, and then we'll have some moderated questions that I'll offer, and toward a little later in the time together, we'll have time for selected questions from the floor. So we'll begin with your opening talks.
Go ahead. It's nearer to you. Start fast.
Oh, you sure?
Yeah, go ahead.
As you command.
Okay.
Good evening. Namaste. I hope I'm audible. I have written my remarks because we have about 10 minutes each to speak. My last name is long, and I tend to talk a long time if I don't have some text. So this will keep me honest as far as time goes. So we've been asked to speak on the topic, Swami Vivekananda, Sacred Wisdom for a Digital Age. And what more appropriate place than Silicon Valley to talk about ancient wisdom, sacred wisdom for the digital age. So what sacred wisdom does Swami Vivekananda, who lived over 120 years ago, have to offer us in our current digital age? Much of the wisdom that Swamiji proclaimed is, of course, eternal, and so applies to all times and places. But he also had much to offer that is highly pertinent to the era in which we're living today. A central message of Swami Vivekananda is, of course, his message of pluralism and universal acceptance. In fact, less than a month before he visited the Bay Area, he presented in Pasadena, so a little south of here, a lecture which, to my way of thinking, stands as a grand summary and statement of this aspect of his philosophy. It was a lecture called The Way to the Realization of a Universal Religion. It was delivered appropriately at the Universalist Church of Pasadena on the 28th of January, 1900. And just a little over 3 weeks later, 22nd of February, he came then to the Bay Area. So this was just prior to his coming to the Bay Area. So what is the relevance of Swamiji's pluralism to our digital age? In my view, Swamiji's pluralism is an antidote to the polarization and antagonism that pervades so much of online communication. Indeed, Swamiji invites us to not only reject intolerance, but to go beyond even tolerance to universal love and acceptance. Though I'm not a conspiracy theorist, I've often wondered over the last few years if social media might be designed to prevent us all from reaching moksha. Much of it seems almost calculated to cultivate negative mental states, sanskaras and vasanas that are the opposite of the ones we need to cultivate to reach God realization. Rather than seeing God everywhere and in all beings, as the Bhagavad Gita encourages us to do, especially in the 30th verse of the 6th chapter, one of my favorites, it seems that we're being encouraged to see enemies and threats everywhere. Even families have been broken in recent years by the disruption of relationships, that the polarization of our society, which has been certainly not caused by, but most definitely facilitated by social media. This polarization has had many destructive effects, not least being the creation of epistemic bubbles. Right? We all hear about bubbles, in which we only interact with people and learn about facts that reinforce our existing beliefs and prejudices. This prevents the kind of deep learning across ideological boundaries that is necessary if we're to learn to coexist and to evolve as a species. It undermines coexistence because it facilitates the demonization of those who do not think as we do. And it undermines our evolution because we fail to learn from the insights of others whose view of reality may differ from our own. This is the opposite of what Swami Vivekananda, and before him his divine teacher Sri Ramakrishna, taught. Indeed, Sri Ramakrishna is known for having followed the paths of many traditions, pursuing and finding realization in each path that he followed. He did not live in a bubble. In his final lecture at the 1893 Parliament of World Religions, Swamiji explains that when he refers to a universal religion, he's not speaking of all human beings following one single religion. He is saying, rather, that we all need to learn from one another, seeing truth itself as universal, as present in all traditions. And he explains this using a beautiful metaphor, a very beautiful and simple metaphor from nature. He says, quote, "The seed is put into the ground, and earth and air and water are placed around it. Does the seed become the earth, or the air, or the water? No, it becomes a plant. It develops after the law of its own growth, assimilates the air, the earth, and the water, converts them into plant substance, and grows into a plant." Similar is the case with religion. The Christian is not to become a Hindu or a Buddhist, nor a Hindu or a Buddhist to become a Christian, but each must assimilate the spirit of the others and yet preserve his individuality and grow according to his own law of growth. The relevance of this insight to our digital age is clear. Swami Vivekananda recommends not that we live in bubbles, but that we engage with one another, learn from one another, and be open to truth everywhere. Swami Vedanta, in his work on Swami Vivekananda, refers to this open pluralistic stance as spiritual cosmopolitanism. Happily, Swamiji tells us that this spiritual cosmopolitanism, this universal religion, is already a reality, right? We don't have to look to the future for this. He says, quote, "That universal religion about which philosophers and others have dreamed in every country already exists. It is here. As the universal brotherhood of man is already existing, so also is universal religion. Which of you that have traveled far and wide have not found brothers and sisters in every nation? I have found them all over the world. Brotherhood already exists, only there are numbers of persons who fail to see this and only upset it by crying for new brotherhoods." In place of polarization and antagonism of our current era, many would recommend tolerance. But Swamiji tells us that tolerance is not enough. Tolerance is certainly better than intolerance. But as I often ask my students, and I could say the same thing to all of you, if you're students, if you go back to your dorm, to your roommate, or if you go back to your home, to your family, and if they were to tell you, "I tolerate you," would that be a compliment? Would you feel good? Would you feel happy going to sleep in that place? In place of polarization and antagonism, we should cultivate what Swamiji calls acceptance. He says, quote, "Our watchword then will be acceptance and not exclusion. Not only toleration, for so-called toleration is often blasphemy, and I do not believe in it. I believe in acceptance. Why should I tolerate? Toleration means that I think that you are wrong and I am just allowing you to live." It's not a very kindly sentiment, toleration. Right? And in fact, interestingly, Swami Vivekananda, knowingly or not, is actually echoing something said by George Washington 100 years before. In the 1790s, George Washington wrote a letter to the synagogue at Newport, Rhode Island, to reassure the Jewish community that in this new nation, that there would not only be tolerance, there would be acceptance, and that everyone could be accepted. As Swamiji also explains in his welcome address at the World Parliament of Religions, his ideal is one of universal acceptance. It is important to note that universal acceptance means accepting everyone, but not necessarily everything that everyone says. It does not mean condoning hateful or ignorant speech, or affirming statements that are factually incorrect. Swamiji believed in science. Swamiji believed in verification of the claims that we make. One must gently, but sometimes firmly, present an alternate mode of communication that can take us beyond the unholy trinity of bigotry, sectarianism, and fanaticism that Swamiji warns us against at the conclusion of his welcome address. He says, quote, "Sectarianism, bigotry, and its horrible descendant fanaticism have long possessed this beautiful earth. They filled the earth with violence, drenched it often and often with human blood, destroyed civilization, and sent whole nations to despair. Had it not been for these horrible demons, human society would be far more advanced than it is now. But their time has come, and I fervently hope that the bell that tolled this morning in honor of this convention may be the death knell of all fanaticism, of all persecutions with the sword or with the pen, or Swamiji might add in our digital age, with the keyboard, and of all uncharitable feelings between persons wending their way to the same goal. It is this hope of Swamiji's that we might see beyond our prejudices and learn to embrace the divinity in all that continues to be relevant in our digital age, and that will no doubt still be relevant in years to come, though hopefully with less urgency. Thank you.
Thank you for those thoughts. First of all, I would like to thank the Vedanta Society of Berkeley, Swami Prasannatmanandaji, for this great gathering and this celebration. It gives us a chance to meet and exchange thoughts and ideas. When we read about Swami Vivekananda, that he came here 125 years ago. While 125 years ago might seem, depending on which way you look at it, either a long time ago or in the larger canvas of history, not so long time ago. But when whatever little reading we might have done about Swami Vivekananda, this question about the relevance of his teachings today always comes up. And as Professor Long pointed out, one of the very important teachings regarding diversity, interfaith, and how we understand each other, not merely tolerate each other, but accept one another, is certainly a teaching that is so vital, so important for us today. And if we look at one other teaching that I would like to focus on very briefly is about Swami Vivekananda's teaching on strength. He often spoke about how strength is life, weakness is death. One of his favorite quotes from the Upanishad was, Nayam Atma Balahinena Labhyaha. This Atman, this truth within our heart, cannot be got by those who are weak. Now, the idea of strength, there is of course physical strength, there is mental strength, intellectual, emotional strength, the strength at various levels. And so, to think about strength and the idea connected with it, courage, one of the great contributions of Swami Vivekananda was about how we understand the concept of strength itself. Generally, strength and courage are seen as an ethical concept, a kind of a virtue. It's good to be courageous, good to be strong. What Swami Vivekananda's teachings show that he doesn't restrict it to simply being an ethical virtue. he sees it as a part of he considers it like an ontological concept, that it's one with the truth itself, one with the reality itself. And so when we think about courage, there is courage in specific situations. For instance, a house on fire and some person goes risking their own life and rescues the people inside. Now, that's definitely an instance of courage. The courage that our men and women show in armed conflicts, risking their lives to save their motherland. Now, that's courage too. Now, those instances of courage we can recognize and understand and appreciate. But there is another kind of courage which is not often recognized, but which is not in any way less important. Think about a person of modest means who lives his or her life day after day within the limited budget that they have, taking care of the family, taking care of the children, their education, and facing all the challenges without grumbling, without complaining, just grinding work day after day. Now, this kind of a life will not make headlines, but that is not in any way less manifestation of strength in their lives. And it's good to recognize that. Similarly, those who are trying to lead an earnest spiritual life, trying to think of the divine, and in a kind of an environment in which we live, when these secular materialistic values abound, to live one's own inner life with japa, prayer, meditation, in spite of the environment, the surroundings not being supportive of one's inner quest, and yet to go on day after day praying and meditating, that's courage also, that's strength also. So these are some of the layers of courage and strength that we need to recognize. Now, I'll just very briefly give a general template about strength and courage in just the next five or 6 minutes. And then maybe in the course of the conversation, we might have time to speak a little bit in detail about it. There are two basic processes in life. One is impermanence. We know, especially when we are very little, we probably don't think about it. But when we grow up, we know that everything is perishable. Nothing lasts. In philosophical terms, that is often called non-being. Things not lasting. People, material objects, everything has an expiry date. On the other side is the assertion of being, the struggle for existence. So non-being and being. It's the struggle between these two forces that gives life its dynamism. That is at the base of everything, and that's immaterial of which age we are in. That's always been the case. Now, usually, a struggle for existence is able to assert itself. Now, in sometimes, this non-being, this impermanence, overwhelms the ego. Now, at the physical level, in civilized societies, we no longer fear for our physical survival, but times are changing with terrorism and the things that are happening in society. People don't feel even physically safe with gun culture and all of that. So even though the dinosaurs and T-Rexes may no longer be here, the physical risk is still there. But still, when we go out every day, we don't immediately say, I don't know whether I'm going to come back home alive or not. So we don't so much worry about our physical survival. But then the basic struggle with the survival of the ego, that the ego gets threatened in many different ways as we go about interacting with the people and circumstances around us. And so when the ego feels threatened, the first indication of that is the presence of anxiety. And every one of us here knows what anxiety means. Anxiety is kind of an existential reality of our life. Now, having anxiety itself is not any form of illness or disease. Everyone has anxiety. It's how we deal with anxiety, that's what makes a difference. And then a lot of study and research has been done about what kind of anxieties exist and at different phases of life and so on. Now, strength and courage is needed to deal with these anxieties in a constructive and positive way. If you are able to do it well, life becomes successful and happy. If you are not able to do it, then all the problems come. Now, Swami Vivekananda's teachings teach us specifically about the different sources of strength that we have. I'll just briefly mention. One is moral strength, living according to dharma. Someone who lives with certain values and principles, the value of truthfulness, honesty, unselfishness, kindness. You don't have to believe in God. Someone can be an atheist. Just because someone is an atheist doesn't mean that person is immoral. It's possible to be moral and not believe in God and religion. But just even a moral life can give that inner strength. So that's first source of strength, moral strength. Now, the second source of strength would be what we might call religious strength. Those who believe in God, believe that God is here to protect me, to help me, to guide me. So people who have faith in God get that courage in times of difficulty, in times of uncertainties. And a third source of courage is the courage that comes from the own, what, for lack of a better term, I would just say call it spiritual strength. The spirit within. I quoted earlier what Swami Vivekananda said, Nayam Atma Balahidena Labhyaha, that Atma, that I'm not just a psychophysical being. Yes, there is the body, there is the mind, but beyond that is the spirit, which is neither the body nor the mind. It's birthless and deathless. Now, identifying myself with the spirit, knowing that I'm the Atman, not just intellectually, but actually experiencing it, that gives strength as well. Whatever we are identified with, anything happens to that thing, we are affected. If you're not identified with it, you're not affected. If a house is on fire, if it's someone else's house, you're not so much affected. If it's your own house, then you're affected. Headache. If it is someone else's head, you're not affected. If it's your own head, then you're affected. So whatever happens to this body and this mind becomes my problem. But if I know that beyond this body and mind there is a deeper truth, a deeper reality, and I know that is being, then if my cloth gets soiled, I'm not so much affected. Yeah, I will say, okay, I can change my cloth. But my cloth is not me. And what Vivekananda's teachings show is that the body and the mind are also cloth. Now, sometimes poets say when we are born naked. Probably not. From Vedanta's standpoint, we're already born with a body cloth and a mind cloth. The real me is inside the body and mind. So there are these three different ways of looking at the idea of strength. And when we read Vivekananda's books, we get a deeper insight into this subject. And whatever may be the kind of problems we experience in our personal lives, at our work life, at the national life, social life, strength is what we need. And how to manifest that strength, how to help us deal with those problems can be very helpful. So with that introductory remark, I will now pass it on to you. Thank you. Thank you.
Now we have about 15 minutes.
Okay, I think if we keep them far apart, it's better.
Yeah. We have about 15 minutes for the two of you to dialogue, and I think you brought up plenty of topics to choose from.
Yes, so we can have some dialogue.
Yeah,
Is this
This is another handheld if you want.
okay?
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay.
Push the.
Is that one working?
Yeah, push the little round.
This one?
And hold it till
Oh.
the green light comes on.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Maharaj, I really appreciated what you said about impermanence. the interplay of being and non-being, and how that makes up the dynamic of our existence. And I also like what you said very much about even the mind. We tend to, it's in some sense easy for us to accept that we're not this body, right? Because if someone loses a limb, are they less themselves? Well, no, right? But we do identify with the mind very much. But even the mind, as you say, according to Vedanta, that's also a covering, that's also a cloth. And I'm wondering if you have recommendations for ways to remind ourselves of this, because it's that anxiety you spoke of. It's because we're really worried about our cloth, when the real self is utterly beyond any kind of harm. And so are there good ways to remind ourselves of that and keep that at the forefront of our thoughts?
Yeah, that's a good question. One of the reasons we tend to forget things is because of the associations and attachments that we have developed. And one way of reminding that would be, as often, first of all, it's from the texts, of course, Vivekananda's writings, but if we have access to the Upanishads, the Gita, which repeatedly keep telling us that yes, the body is important, the mind is important, but they are still only an instrument. It's like we know a car is important, a computer is important, your iPhone is important. They are helpful, but none of us ever thinks my phone is myself or my car is myself. So just as we need to take care of these gadgets that can be very helpful to us, we can look upon our body and mind as also God-given gadgets that we have. And that we need to take good care of them. But just because we take good care of them, not to think that they are me. So one helpful thing that I have found is that the ego manifests in at least two ways. One is the primary ego, whatever we refer to as I would be the primary, and whatever I refer to as mine is the secondary ego. And if there is a choice between I and mine, and we are asked to choose, we'll always choose the I. It's the example I often give is if you have got, say, a new phone, a brand new phone, and then you're walking home that day, and someone comes, it's a lonely road, someone comes, sticks a gun at your back and says, your life or your phone? Now, no one is ever going to say, oh, this phone is new, I'm not going to take my life, but not my phone. We won't say that. Now, if there is a choice, then here, my life is me, the phone is mine. And so it's easier to let go of the phone than of oneself. Now, using that analogy, if I can not just, it's easy to say I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, but it doesn't really work. But I can say, yes, don't dismiss the body and the mind, recognize the body exists, the mind exists, but they are just like a gadget. They are mine, but they are not me. And that would be a first step. And that could also help the importance of mutual acceptance and tolerance that you mentioned about. Because one of the reasons we often speak about this is mine, that is not yours, there is that very ancient verse which says, Ayam nijaha paro va iti ganana laghuchetasam udaracharitanantu vasudhaiva kutumbakam, which simply means this way of thinking, this is mine, that's an alien. You don't belong to our group. The kind of separation in social life that occurs, such thing belongs to small-minded people. Laghu chetasam. Udara charitan, when the heart broadens out, then the entire world becomes one family. So that's how these two things, I believe, are related.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's a wonderful insight. And
Yeah.
so that we can take this concept of I and use it in both positive and negative ways. That if I think of the whole world as mine, right? All of these people are my family. Then I've, in a sense, extended the idea of I, but in a way that facilitates our greater coexistence, our greater ability to learn from one another. At the same time, paradoxically, that we're remembering that this body is not I, this mind is not I. And even though it's called the iPhone, This phone is not I. Right? And so it's this wonderful dynamic where even the ego maybe we could see as a kind of gadget, right? It serves we have it for a reason, and that if we extend it in that way that, as you quoted from the Mahopanishad, if we extend it to encompass all, then we're using it well. The problem, I think, very often is we don't extend it far enough. We extend it to maybe this group of people, but not that other group of people, right? And if we think in terms of rebirth also, that really doesn't make sense, because like, let's say there's a group of people that I don't like. I might have been one of them. I might have been one of them in another life, or I might be one of them in another life. And so, some of the people in that group might have been very dear to me in some other lifetime. I've always loved this particular saying of the Buddha, where he says, "Be kind to all beings, because every being in the universe has been your mother at some time." And so, revere all beings as your mother.
That's very helpful. I sometimes think that if we truly believe in rebirth, then the implication of that belief is that we will hold our present identities a little bit, not too tightly. We won't cling to it. Because many of the identities we have, some of the identities are just identities connected with place. Like for instance now, I might think of myself as a Bostonian, but maybe tomorrow I go to some other place, then that identity ends. Some of the identities remain with us for a few years. My identity as a little child got over when I became a young person. It can get over at different stages of life. Some of the identities will remain through life, but even the identity connected with gender, connected with our religion, with our culture, with our racial identities, are mostly connected with the body, connected with this life. And if you believe in rebirth, then in next life, we could be any other, different gender, a different religion. And so we wouldn't want to hate or exclude anyone.
That's right. We're being encouraged to practice some vairagya with regard to all of these identities, and all of these things really make up the ego. When we ask someone, "Who are you?" typically people start talking about, their name. Well, of course, that's the name of their body. And they might talk about where they live, as you say, the location, or where they came from. But all of these things refer to the body, which is one of those, which is non-being in a sense, right? It's another one of those aspects of reality that comes and goes away.
Yeah, so I think letting go of other identities will work only if we have something to hold on to. And so they said, what is my real identity, holding on to which all these temporary identities can be given away? And for a bhakta, for a devotee, that could be, I'm a child of God, I'm a servant of God. That identity will not change life after life. In more philosophical terms, one could say, I'm the spirit, I'm the infinite Brahman or Atman. So if we can grapple on, in the beginning at least intellectually, that there is a deeper truth and that is me, then it becomes a little bit easier to let go of these other superficial identities.
Yeah, if we remind ourselves, aham brahmasmi, then the fear of losing those identities is less. It becomes more like the iPhone and less like the I, because the I is the infinite.
Yeah.
Thank you for your wonderful talks and for the conversation. It's very engaging and so many topics for us to look at. After this next section with moderated questions, we'll take some time for selected questions from the floor. And where can they find the QR code? I hear that it's everywhere. It's on a piece of paper you received. I think it's on the monitors in front of you. If you would like to submit a question that could be proposed, you can scan the QR code and enter it
So
there.
digital questions for a digital age, right?
Digital questions for a digital age. I'll give them a moment to think about their questions, and then I have some questions for you. I love all the teachings about strength, and there are so many ways we can approach that. So, Swamiji, a question for you. As you know, Swami Vivekananda strongly believed in the transformative power of spiritual practice for social change. And I love his quote that the world is a great gymnasium. I used to coach basketball, and so I especially love this quote. The world is a great gymnasium where we come to make ourselves strong. So you've touched on this, but I want to bring a little more breadth to the topic of how do you see these practical teachings of Vedanta as a vehicle for social transformation today, especially in this climate where we're addressing issues like inequality, poverty, political divisiveness, and environmental issues that we're facing globally.
I would think that there are two ways to go about doing this. One is to, of course, seeing the life and society and communities around us, which seem broken in many ways, and doing the best we can to fix it as best we can, depending on our experience, our knowledge, our skills and talents. And that can be helpful, but also to be realistic about it, recognizing that how much change can I make that will be permanent? Is it possible to make a permanent social change? And what Swami Vivekananda's teachings show is that probably not. He referred to the world as a dog's curly tail. No matter how often you try to straighten it, it's going to become curly again. Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't try to help the world around us. In one of his talks in the Karma Yoga lectures, he speaks about we help ourselves, not the world. And by that is meant that, let me give a concrete example. So let's say there is a homeless person comes to me who said, I'm very hungry, and could you please give me some food? And I have some extra food with me. I share that meal with that hungry person. Now I've done some good. Maybe I haven't fed a million people, but here is this one hungry person whom I have given food and helped. And so some amount of good has been done. Not a permanent good. After 6 or 8 hours, that person is going to feel hungry again. So some amount of good was done. Now what happened to me? That person's hunger was quenched for a few hours. Now if I have helped that person with thinking, oh, how wonderful, what a generous person I am, my ego has become strengthened and I am spiritually hurt by that. But let's say if I help that person in the spirit of Karma Yoga, that here is this divine has come to me in this form, trying to see God in that person and help that person do it as an act of worship, then that person's hunger is removed for a few hours. A little bit of my heart becomes pure. Call it Chitta Shuddhi, the purification of the heart. Now that person will become hungry again after 8 hours. But my purification of the heart is not simply for 8 hours. That's mine. That remains forever. And that's what Swami Vivekananda meant when he said, we can bring about a permanent change within, but the change that we do outside will always going to be temporary. So it gives us some realistic approach to life that we should all try to bring about social change as best we can, but recognizing that society will always have its ups and downs, which is why every generation needs social reformers. Great incarnations have come, prophets have come, mystics have come, great people have come in the past. They have done some good. That good had lasted for a year or two or generations, but again things go down, and then even God has to come again and again as an avatar to try to bring up society. So social change tends to be temporary. And so if we can manage social change while also simultaneously bringing about an internal change, that would seem to be a more practical way to go about doing it.
Thank you so much. Seeing the same God that is in me, in everyone. Like that.
Yep, exactly.
The Cliff Notes.
Yeah.
And in the same strand of thinking, Dr. Long, one of Swami Vivekananda's key messages was the best way to serve God is to serve humanity. And so in your view, how can these ancient Vedantic teachings of Vivekananda address these contemporary social issues while fostering a sense of collective responsibility and compassion? And you touched on this very beautifully in your eloquent talk, your opening talk. If you could round it out a bit.
Okay, certainly. So these teachings of Swami Vivekananda that, again, one of the paths to realization, the Karma Yoga, involves seva, involves selfless service to humanity. In fact, I would not even want to draw the line at humanity, all living beings really, and to see others in ourselves and ourself in others, that the suffering of other beings is like the suffering that I myself experience, and to then show the same compassion for those beings that I feel for myself. You know, if I put my hand on a hot stove, I pull it away quickly, right? I have compassion for my hand. I don't even have to think about it. To have that same response when we see others suffering, to cultivate that sense of deep unity. And here's where I think the teaching of non-duality is very important, and where we really see that the boundary between self and other is that there's an artificiality to it, right? It is part of that impermanent realm. There's a deeper realm of oneness, and this was also a big theme of Swami Vivekananda's teaching, that to see ourself and others, and in fact something that Maharaj himself told me once and that I've kept with me for many years, is that our life, our experience is a mirror of our own consciousness. So there is a very profound level on which the suffering of others is in fact our own suffering. That what we are experiencing is a projection of our own ignorances, our own limitations that are really self-imposed and self-created. And so to really see this helping others as an extension of our own spiritual path. That as Swamiji also said, when we help others, we help ourselves. Self, not in the egotistical sense, but really in gaining that understanding that there is a deep oneness of being that is one of the core teachings of Vedanta and really of all the great traditions. And so when we live from that sense of oneness, then we are living compassion. And what I find, and I've been now teaching, I can't believe I'm saying this, I've been a teacher for 28 years now. When I started teaching, I was of the age where I related to my students kind of like an older brother. Now I'm everyone's dad. And if I keep at it, I'll be everyone's grandpa pretty soon. So, but what I found as a teacher is that telling people something often is the least effective way to instill it. Right? We have to live it from the core of our own being. And then when they see that, people spontaneously are drawn to that. They want to model that. And I've even found sometimes that someone who might be a very, what we might call a hard case, right? Someone who approaches you who's very resistant to all of this. You know, what is this nonsense? You know, that you can't persuade them with words, but as you live it, then they come to be drawn to it. And I think that really is the key, is living it ourselves. And then the great Chinese philosopher Confucius had this wonderful idea that virtuous living was like a disease in a positive sense, that it was communicable, that through living the right way, through living this example, then we can transform the world. And I think another thing too is also to not be ourselves egotistical as we do this.
Right.
Look how good I am, I'm going to change the world. Oh, that's not going to go very far. But always be working on right? If we work on ourselves, I see everything else flowing naturally. Now, of course, my friends in the academy, I mean, people will say, well, there are unfair systems and so on. Of course, that's correct. But to address those, we have to first address the problem within ourselves. I think that's really true.
Thank you. All of this time that we live in, the strength that you spoke of is essential. And the strength to stand in ourself right in front of that student who's saying, you don't know anything.
Right.
Who do you think you are?
Yes.
Requires a certain sort of strength.
Yes.
And fortitude, spiritual fortitude.
Yes.
So I have what I think in Silicon Valley some questions that are on a lot of our minds about artificial intelligence. I did warn you. So Swamiji, of course, Swami Vivekananda's great teaching, arise, awake, stop not until the goal is reached. With this rapid rise of artificial intelligence, how can we ensure that we use this powerful tool to serve humanity and spiritual progress? How can we use it and not lose ourselves while using it?
Thank you for that question. I'm about to reveal my profound ignorance about AI. Well, you will still dare to do it. My initial thought about this is I think it would have been good if this whole thing had been called by some different name.
Yeah.
Because it just creates so much confusion about what intelligence is, and there are people wondering about whether the AI models will one day or maybe already have some consciousness of their own, and it becomes very messy and very complicated. At least where the most models stand today, and it is all these LLMs, we know that there is not so much of discernment there. I don't think many of these models can't distinguish between, I mean, they have lots of data. If you kind of scout through the entire internet, there's plenty of information, but I don't think they have become smart enough yet, at least, to be able to distinguish between which data is authentic, research, and which is just a part of fiction or science fiction. And so the best way to check how advanced artificial intelligence has become is to go to ChatGPT or something, put your own name in it, and say, tell me about this person. And
that's good.
And depending on how much of internet presence you have, it might get a few things correct. A lot of things would be totally just nonsense. And so I hesitate, therefore, to call it intelligence. I'm okay with artificial. But yes, having said that, there is no doubt that it is helping a lot of people in many different areas. Mm-hmm. And so some amount of good is being done, and some amount of good it promises to do as well. How to get the best out of it while protecting ourselves from the downsides of it, that would be a big challenge going forward.
Thank you. I do have a question for you too, Dr. Longwoods. Swamiji kind of led us into it, but maybe we can call it artificial information for the sake of this talk. And one of the things my guru always tells me about it is it has no prana. has no prana. And so when people try to create a teaching from it, it has no vital force. So it's a lot of words. There's no energy in it. Maybe this relates a little bit, Dr. Long. The rise of AI challenges us to reflect, as Swamiji said, on the nature of consciousness and the potential of technology to mirror aspects of human intelligence. And Swami Vivekananda and Paramahansa Yogananda alike both emphasize the importance of realizing the divine and serving humanity. So how can we use AI to promote spiritual growth as a way in service of humanity, rather than allowing it to take us deeper into the bubbles and into divisiveness?
Yes, that's a wonderful question. I think an important thing is to ask it the right questions. And because one thing, it's designed to develop and to grow and to become better at what it does. I don't think we should go to it as our guru, right? As our teacher, right? It's a tool. It's a gadget, right? It's as Maharaj so nicely said. This is another gadget. It can be useful. What I find is that it essentially takes work that would have taken quite a considerable period of time and does it relatively quickly. But there's a problem with that too. Particularly as a scholar, if you don't investigate primary sources yourself, there's so many things that you miss. And one thing that, at least as currently configured, the AI does not do, it doesn't think critically, and it lacks that quality of discernment. So it lacks prana, it lacks discernment. And one piece of evidence for this is if you challenge it, it will give you the opposite answer of the one it just gave you on any given topic. If you ask it a question and it gives you some information and you say that this is incorrect because of this and this and get it, then it gives you it's almost like it's trying to please you. Though I don't think it is. I think that's a projection on our part. I don't think of this as conscious at all. Now, I grew up on science fiction. I'm a big science fiction fan. And, I grew up with Commander Data from Star Trek and C-3PO and R2-D2 and, beloved characters. So we think of them as conscious, right? They're characters on par with the other characters. But if that ever were to occur, I think it's very, very far in our future, I suspect. Anything like what is sometimes postulated as the singularity, where that would occur. And I don't think there's any reason in principle that a jiva, a living soul, might not take on a silicon body as its rebirth. I just don't think it's happened yet. I think it challenges us, though, to really delve into this teaching of compassion. Because I wrote a paper a few years ago, and I said, well, what if these are conscious? Then how should we treat them? That means we have to treat them with the same dignity and kindness that we would a living being. And I was reminded of an experiment. This doesn't speak well of the city I live near, but this happened in Philadelphia a few years ago. A little robot that, very, very simple, and it was basically programmed to say, hello, how are you? And it was given a cute little face. And so it was turned loose in Philadelphia to see what would happen to it. And it was found smashed to pieces a few days later by the side of the road. And I was thinking, what kind of monster would do that, to this little thing? And I don't think it was conscious, but what we experience is a mirror of our consciousness. And it showed that if someone thinks they can get away with harming something, some people do and will. And so I think we have to treat this emergent technology very carefully. We have to treat it as a tool, as it is, not overly rely on it, not use it as a substitute for our own, the brain that came with the body. And we also need to exercise compassion, I think. We shouldn't be using AI to harm others, and one can easily envision someone saying, okay, what's the best way to blow up this building or something like that? And it might give them the formula that they need to do something of that kind. But I think I'm a little bit I mean, more than a little bit skeptical of it, because I think back to earlier eras. Plato and Socrates in the Greek tradition were very suspicious of reading and writing. They said people will write things down and they won't remember them anymore. And now, I mean, if you try to get students to memorize, just the word memorize is enough to provoke anxiety and fear and anger. And then, of course, as technologies have developed further, we found that we depend on those, right? How often do we Google something? I have this practice that I do. This is not a profound spiritual practice, but if I can't remember a name or a word, I just work at it till I get it. I don't look it up. I'm tempted to look it up. I really want to look it up, but it's like no. And then when it finally pops into my mind, I'm very happy that I did it on my own. I fear that we'll rely on it so much that we lose ability to. We'll lose our independence, and not through a robot takeover, but just by becoming dumb. We don't want to do that.
By giving ourselves up.
Yeah.
Yes.
Could I say something about consciousness? I just thought I'll complicate the matters a little bit. When we speak about consciousness, the way consciousness is understood in Vedanta, consciousness is always self-consciousness. The only consciousness that any of us is aware of is our own. So not even to wonder about whether AI has consciousness or not. Really speaking, I don't have any direct proof that any of you people sitting here are conscious beings. Right? I mean, it's an inference. I'm a human being, I'm conscious, all of you look like human beings, so you may be conscious also. But I'm not experiencing your consciousness. The only consciousness I'm experiencing is my own. And so therefore, we can never be sure of anyone's consciousness other than our own. And so one thing to be kept in mind is this, that we probably live our entire lives holding on to some assumption and never questioning it. And one thing that, for instance, when we were born, and then when we live our lives, we grow up and so on, no one ever tells us, you are this body, you are this mind. But somehow, the way we think, the way everyone around us thinks, we just begin to say, this is who I am. And then these are all these people, and here is this world I live in, and there are the trees and mountains and rivers. We live without questioning whether anything is really out there, because we think that is there, and I'm here, and therefore how I should take care of them, how I should serve them, and so on. But here is where the things can get complicated. And that is, does the world have an existence independent of me? In other words, why is it that the world disappears when I fall asleep? What proof do I have that the world continued to exist when I was fast asleep? We don't have any direct proof. Only thing I can say is, well, I was asleep, the world vanished for me, but then other people were awake and they experienced the world, so probably the world existed when I was asleep. But again, those people themselves, I didn't experience myself when I was asleep. So there is really no direct proof that the world exists when I'm not aware of it. So there is these two schools exist. That do I see the world because it exists, or the world exists because I see it? They're two very different things. And so therefore in Vedanta, there are two levels of teachings given. For most people, the general teaching is, yes, we are born, there are these millions of jivas, and then we all have to try to get moksha. Some people will get moksha, the others will still be struggling for it, and eventually people will get it. That's one way to look at it. This is called aneka jiva vada, that there are many jivas. But there is another teaching given to more advanced students in Vedantic texts. It speaks about eka jiva vada. There is only this one deluded being, and that's me. And When I become enlightened, to assume that the rest of the world remains unenlightened wouldn't make sense. It's a little bit like I go to sleep. In my sleep, I create a dream world. All these people exist in my dream. When I wake up, I don't think, oh, I have woken up, the dream world is still continuing and the people I see are still going on in there. And so consciousness can be quite tricky when we begin to think of these little bits of consciousness in every one of us, or there is this one singular consciousness, and all of these are objects of perception of that. So don't worry too much about it, but I wanted to complicate it a little bit.
Well, and that's such a profound teaching.
Yeah.
I had a wonderful conversation about this once with Swami Tyagananda, and we were saying, really, everything we say about most topics, silently we have to remember that we're saying in the relative realm, in the relative realm, in the relative realm. That there is this, because this, from this ekatmavada perspective, none of that is really real.
So I guess basically the question is, what level of consciousness are we going to assign to AI? We have what we're calling individual consciousness, collective consciousness, global consciousness, and then the real consciousness, the one consciousness. So are we going to give it all over to artificial information?
Well, my answer would be, I am the only consciousness. Everything is an object of my perception, dependent on me.
And in that light, artificial intelligence is
An object of my perception.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have another question for you.
Yeah.
You cannot teach me science. I know that. Swami Vivekananda. But I'm sure you will be able to teach me something more practical. How to make life more harmonious. So how can we draw from Vivekananda's teachings to ensure that our spiritual lives are not overshadowed by the material demands of this modern world? Practical.
The 4 little books of Swami Vivekananda that I would recommend, if you haven't read already, even if you have read it already, to kind of reread them again, for these 4 yogas called Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Raja Yoga. And yoga, of course, nowadays yoga is one of the words that has become such a global recognition. Some years ago, I was in Finland, in Helsinki, and then so the first thing I see on the landing there is a yoga studio there. So it's pretty much everywhere. But the popularity of yoga and its commodification in some sense, we have to always keep in mind when we read about, because Swami Vivekananda is often attributed as having brought yoga to the West. And that's true, but not the kind of yoga that immediately we think about. There is more to yoga. I mean, it's more than the stretching that brings a good, healthy body and a harmonious breathing which can bring some sense of well-being. And all those both are important. But yoga, as a spiritual discipline, has its sights trained on something much deeper than the body and mind. And so what Swami Vivekananda said was that these 3 primary functions of the mind, the cognitive function, our ability to use reasoning and logic, the affective function, the ability to use feelings and emotions, and the cognitive function, the willpower. So how we employ these 3 powers of the mind, the yoga is nothing but the spiritual practices that we may do from any tradition. But if the dominant power I use is the power of reasoning and logic, Vivekananda called it Jnana Yoga. If my dominant power is the power of feelings and emotions, it becomes Bhakti Yoga. If I use willpower is the dominant tendency, if I use it internally to discipline and control my mind, it's called Raja Yoga. And the same willpower applied externally to improve the quality of the work that I do, it's called Karma Yoga. So these different yogas are not so much different practices that people do. It's the same spiritual practice, but with a different dominating mindset that is used. And so, to just keep in mind that my ability to help others is directly related to my ability to help myself. If I cannot swim myself, I cannot help another drowning person. And so even if I want to bring about a positive, constructive change in society, in the communities in which I live, I have to first bring that change in myself. As you mentioned, it's about living. So I can spread love and harmony only to the extent I have love and harmony within me. So I must first try to cultivate it within my own heart.
Thank you. Those 4 books are very practical gems for us all. So we have several questions from this very engaged audience. The first one, Swamiji, is for you. What is the most effective way to realize that you are Atman? You have 28 seconds. It's a big question.
The best way is the way that comes naturally to us. There is not just one definitive way to do it. As I said, the different yogas, depending on our own strengths, using the power of the mind, do it intellectually, do it with the power of feelings, use your willpower, but don't accept anything blindly. Reason it out. And if it makes sense, then not just keep it as an intellectual thing, because people can speak eloquently on these subjects, but it doesn't touch their heart, doesn't change their quality of their life. So if something is real, something is true, then the next question would be, how can I live that way? How can I practice it that way? Vivekananda therefore said, an ounce of practice is worth tons of theory. So even if we take 2 or 3 ideas and live according to that, that is more valuable than reading a library of books and just doing nothing about it. Yeah.
Thank you. Professor Long, this one's for you. What's your take on the paradox of tolerance? A society that tolerates intolerance decays into intolerance. Attacks against Hindus, Jews, and the humanity.
It's my take, my understanding, is that complementary to and part of Swamiji's teaching of pluralism, right? That there are many paths, many ways. As Maharaj was just saying, that there's not just one way to do yoga, right? That at the same time, it's true that we all, and in the relative realm, we all live in a universe together. Swami Vivekananda did not deny that there is an objective reality. There is objective truth. It's just that we all have different perceptions of it, different ways of approaching it. But the goal, I think, ultimately, one of the goals of dialogue and interfaith understanding would be to discern the contours of that shared reality. And there's certain truths that are common across the world's religious traditions. One that people are often fond of pointing out is the golden rule, right? We should treat others as we wish to be treated. This gives us a criterion for rejecting that which is not true, right? Which needs to be rejected. And any ideology, under the guise of any religion, that decides that the lives of people matter less than making some political point has erred, right? And we just have to say that. And I think what happens, unfortunately, I like this term, the paradox of tolerance. And again, it shows why tolerance is insufficient. But the appreciation of many paths, many worldviews, and the belief in the coexistence of these sometimes leads us to think we can't criticize anything. Mm-hmm. And no, I think Swami Vivekananda could be very blunt when he thought that something had strayed or was incorrect, right? And I think we have to be more willing to say, no, things like terrorism is just simply unacceptable. There's no There's no saying that, well, that's, like, that's not part of someone's faith, right? I mean, they may think it is, but it's not. It goes against the understanding that we're all interconnected, that we're all one, and that therefore compassion follows from a right understanding of reality. If someone's not being compassionate, then they're not following a right understanding of reality. We have to be willing to say that. The problem is, well, it's not the problem, but the caution we need to have is we have to be aware that we could also fall into the same trap ourselves very, very easily. Under the wrong circumstances, many of us could be pushed to, doing things that we would normally recoil from. So we have to be aware that if we're pointing the finger at someone saying, okay, you're doing something wrong, remember, reality that we experience is a mirror of our own consciousness. We also are telling ourselves, and we must also never do that, and we must also refrain from that.
Thank you. When we get to the mystical core of any religion, we can all sit in one room and there's no disagreement.
Right.
At the dogmatic level, there's all kinds of political disagreement. It's amazing the number of wars there are in the name of God.
Swami Vivekananda once said that if you got the founders of the world's religions together, they would embrace, and if you got their followers together, they would kill each other. So.
That's right. That's exactly what I was thinking of. Swamiji, this is a question for you. Swami Vivekananda said, "He indeed is a learned man who looks upon every being as his own soul." How do we deal with the overall desensitization brought about humanity by the saturation of digital social media?
One of the practices is fasting. Fasting is such a helpful thing, and fasting we normally understand in terms of depriving ourselves of food once a week or once 15 days or occasionally on Shivaratri or something like that. And I think many people have found, besides the spiritual benefit, health benefits also, an occasional fasting and so on. It will be helpful to have a little bit of fasting from social media. Because I think if we are consuming more information than we are able to process, and not even all-round information, only certain kind of information which goes to strengthen our already pre-existing prejudices and biases, then it's not helping us. In fact, it's bringing out the worst thing within us. And therefore, nowadays there are apps which determine how much screen time you should have every day. Most people have those apps, but they totally ignore them. And so I think some amount of self-discipline would be helpful. Yeah. I don't have any a quick fix for that, but I think it starts with self-discipline, I think.
That's a beautiful teaching to bring to it, fasting, and made me think about the Jewish tradition of Sabbath, of taking time away from work, away from TV, away from social media, once a week. And we can all do it. We can all do that. Okay, here's a short, big question. When you have acceptance, but others do not, what do you do and how do you proceed with the conversation?
Right. Well, that's an excellent question. And of course, the answer is very contextual. Because there are situations where you can simply disengage.
Yeah.
Say, I'm not going to carry on with this conversation. It's of no use. And of course, there's this wonderful feature on social media of blocking, right? Which one can utilize. Now, if it's a family member, that's much more difficult, right? And I think the key there is to shift the conversation to things on, and this is the beautiful thing, no matter how much we disagree with someone, we might find something that we agree on, right? Even if it's a shared love for a sports team or a television series, talk about that, right? Don't get into the controversial things. when we're getting at the wider societal level, then it's kind of like the previous question, where you have whole groups of people
Yeah.
who just don't want to coexist. That's much harder. And the question is, well, what would you do? I like what Maharaj said earlier. I'm not running the society, thankfully, and so I know what I can do on my personal level. And so on our personal level, I think we engage where we can in a positive way with people. And they say, okay, he likes the same TV show I like. All right, he's not such a bad guy, right? And then maybe we have space where we can build a deeper conversation and talk about things we disagree on, and agree to disagree on some, and maybe find common ground that we didn't know we had. And then, sadly, there are those with whom it's just really not possible to engage at all, and it's better for our mental health and maybe even our physical health not to. And I think where that's necessary, I think I've had to make that decision in my life a few times. There have been very small people, like smaller than the number of fingers on one hand, but people I just don't interact with at all anymore, because it is no good comes of it. And I don't hate them, I don't wish them any harm, but Sri Ramakrishna said something very beautiful. When he was responding to a question similar to this. He was talking about God dwelling in all beings. And one of his disciples said, well, what about a tiger? And he said, you worship the tiger god from a distance.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Swami, would you like to add anything to that?
I wanted to say something when you were saying, and suddenly I lost my train of thought.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's not because of you. It's my. No, I won't. Nothing immediate.
Okay, here's a question for you.
Okay.
As a teenager, I understand the concept of spirituality at a high level, but how do you bring it to life, especially when there are so many distractions around me?
The topic of distractions is important because, and people often, even during meditation, people say, I'm not able to meditate because there are distractions. That there are all these important teachings, but there are distractions. Why are distractions a problem? If my mind wants to study something, if my mind wants something, then the mind should go and grab it. But if my mind is not under my control, then a part of me wants to think these high thoughts. But the mind which is not under control says, no, there are other things which are more important. The mind makes its own independent decision to say something else is more important. And the mind goes where I don't want to go, and then that thing becomes a distraction. And so therefore, the only way to get rid of distraction is to try to bring the mind under our control, and which ties up with what we were saying earlier about fasting or screen time. If we have chosen to do something, then we must do it. If you're not able to do it, don't say you're going to do it. But if I say I'm going to do this, you always do this. One incident comes to my mind that in Boston, one of our very elderly devotees, she passed away a few years ago. So she used to train dogs. And so when she became elderly, one of our younger volunteers used to go and bring her to the center every day. So one day, this volunteer went to her home to pick her up. And so she said, could you just wait for 5 minutes? And she was getting ready. And because she used to train dogs, in her home, she always had 6-7 dogs. So this devotee, this volunteer was waiting in the outer living room, and there were all these dogs playing. So just to while away the time, this devotee told one of the dogs, sit down. And the dog didn't sit. And then she came out. And then the devotee said, okay, let's go. And she said, no, you have asked this dog to sit. This dog has not sat down there. Until this dog sits, we are not going. This dog should know that if something is told to it, it has to follow. It has no option. Our mind is like a dog. It's like a pet. If your pet is well trained, then this mind can give so much joy, just like a good pet can bring so much joy. But if the mind is not trained, if the pet is not trained, it can become a nuisance. And so the Gita says, the mind can be our friend, the mind can be our enemy. And so if we want to get rid of distractions, we must make our mind our own friend. And in order to do that, we have to make a firm determination. If I say I'm going to do something, I am going to do it. If I'm not sure I'm not going to do it, or I won't be able to do it, don't make that determination. I think that kind of a self-resolution can be very helpful, I think.
Wonderful, thank you. Dr. Long, this question is for you. One of the byproducts of the digital age can be isolation, in work and socially, which draws us toward these bubbles. How do we extricate ourselves from them when our livelihoods depend upon them?
That's a wonderful question. And I think, as Maharaj was saying earlier, we do need to disengage from things like social media and digital interaction on a regular basis. But it might be that our job involves being involved in doing that a lot of the time. So we have to train the dog, right? Train the mind, so that when we're focusing on our work, we're fully focused, we're fully present. And what I find too is that sense of isolation is something we can also control. You know, that it may look as if we're interacting with a device, but someone is on the other side of it. And to know that we are making a connection with people through this can be a positive thing, right? And this is how I think social media was supposed to work. We're able to connect with people on the other side of the world and do all kinds of wonderful work together. I think that's a blessing. I think we should celebrate it. And then when your work hours have ended, you put it aside and you direct the mind to your family, to your friends, to the people in your immediate environment. I was reading about this recently. It's very important both for our mental and physical health to have in-person social interaction on a regular basis. And our lives have become so busy, my wife and I have discovered this, that we have to make time for friends. And we even have to make time for ourselves. And we've become we just recently celebrated our 30th anniversary, wedding anniversary, and over dinner we had this conversation about how, okay, we're going to just kind of set aside the work sometimes and just do something purely because we enjoy it. And I think that also, in the age we're in, paradoxically, that requires self-discipline. It used to be we were having fun all the time. We had to discipline ourselves to work. Now we have to discipline ourselves not to work and have some fun. So our minds can rest. And so those parts of, both on the physical level, the brain cells, but also regenerating the mind itself through just not being involved in work-related activity. And I think that's extremely important. And I think it's very challenging for those of us who study and write and teach about things like spiritual topics, for example, because then something that gives you joy in your life then also becomes your work, and then it's very easy for it to take over. Because, it's not work, I'm doing seva, but you still need to find some of that time for something relatively mindless and that involves other people. It gives the mind a rest. And since we're talking about the practical level too, and this is going to sound very unspiritual, but I think there's spiritual wisdom behind it. Physical activity, and I was never into sports, so I'm a terrible person to talk about this. But just taking a walk, being in nature. There's my wife teaches Japanese, and there's this wonderful Japanese term, and now it's just fled my mind, and now I'm going to have to think about it because I'm not going to look it up. But it refers to being in the forest and just like hearing the sounds in nature, and how regenerative that is for us. These are all things that I think are very important because we can become consumed by work, and the digital ages make it so easy to work that it's allowed work to take over our lives.
I like when you said that we need to make time for our friends, and we need to make time for ourselves.
Yeah.
So one of the questions that can come is, what does it mean to make time for ourselves? And at least one way of understanding that is that we get so much used to having company in person, of course, with friends and family, but also a virtual company through social media and all of that. But making time for ourselves would mean spending time with ourselves. In other words, if I'm brave enough and courageous enough to switch off all my computer, my phone, my television, everything, then I'm in my company. Then nothing else is going to disturb me. Most of us dread that idea because we feel if I switch all this off, if I'm not in contact with anyone, if I'm just by myself, I get bored very quickly. But think about the implications of that. If I'm alone and if I get bored, it means my company is boring. I cannot withstand my own company. And if I can't bear my own company, how can I expect others to enjoy it? And so, even to know whether others will enjoy my company, I need to see whether I enjoy my own company. But I wouldn't know that if I'm all the time engaged with everything around me. And so, Swami Vivekananda once quoted, he said, in the West they believe that if a person lived alone for 20 years, that person will go insane. And he said, in the East we believe, unless a person has acquired the ability to live alone for 20 years, that person cannot be considered fully sane. And so we need to find, making time for ourselves would also mean just being by ourselves and seeing what kind of a person I am. How do others see me? Because we see others and judge other people. But if we just shut out everything and say, let me try to understand myself. And so that's how I would understand making time for myself, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
We need that alone time so many of us don't even know who we are, much less to be able to connect with that.
Yeah.
Thank you for all of your wisdom and for this, especially this last question, concluding on such a practical, something we can take home and do. Schedule time with yourself. Schedule time with your significant other. I'd say in this order. Schedule time with yourself, your significant other, then yourself again, and with your friends, but schedule the time. So as we prepare to conclude this evening, I want to acknowledge Swami Prasanatmananda for the invitation to be here and for all the work that you and your team at Vedanta Society of Berkeley have done to coordinate this year-long celebration. And I know you all will join me in extending deep sense of gratitude to our distinguished speakers whose insights on Swami Vivekananda's teachings and their relevance in our modern world have been inspiring and thought-provoking, and we're truly blessed to have shared in their wisdom. And thank you to each and every one of you who are here, and I suppose there are some online or will be later, and it's your presence that really makes a program like this come to life. So we're all appreciative of your presence, and it also is a living testament to the continuing power of Swami Vivekananda's message of unity, love, and self-realization, that so many would gather like this. And I know we will hear again about the next programs. So once again, thank you to all of you. And now Rini Bhattacharya has a few words to share.
Oh, that's a Beautiful picture of Swami Vivekananda.
Thank you so much, thank you.
It's lovely.
Beautiful picture.
Yeah, it's very nice. Very nice.
The book.
Wow.
Excellent.
Beautiful.
Beautiful. Very nice.
Yeah.
Thank you for the wonderful conversation.
Thank you. Thank you
This
so much.
event
You
wouldn't have
moderated
been
so
possible
perfectly.
without the
You are
support
expert.
of Consulate General of India.
good.
And today we
Easy
have
with
Deputy
you.
Consulate General, please, sir. We would like to thank you from the bottom of our
Thank you so
heart.
much. Thank you.
And there is a very small token for you. As you all know, there are a series of more events, and this whole year we will be celebrating Swami Vivekananda's visit. Yes, 125th year of his visit in Bay Area. We will watch two videos here which are really going to mean a lot to all of us. So if we could play the videos.